Good morning, and thank you for joining us, SSE, today for our webinar on Windows 7 and Server 2008. My name is Tom Vesley, and I am the Business Development Manager here at SSE. And as a lot of you may already know, come January 14th, 2020, both of these products, Windows 7 and 2008, will be completely unsupported by Microsoft. Vince Seacrest, SSE's Virtual Chief Information Officer, has created this presentation to share some information on what that is going to look like and what it will mean moving forward. And Vince works with all of our clients on a day-to-day basis on topics such as this to help strategically plan and budget for big changes like this from Microsoft. And with no further ado, I will now pass you over to Vince, who will share some hopefully very beneficial information to you folks. Vince, why don't you take it away?
Okay, thank you, Tom. And yeah, we're happy to put this presentation together because we did have a few folks, new clients that are coming in that did inherit, have a lot of Windows 7 and some 2008. And folks have had a lot of questions on how to deal with it, how to best prepare. So we prepared some tips for you today. We'll go through and cover all the items that I have and then have some question and answer there at the end. So big items, let me make sure I got my little laser pointer on and go ahead and go through. So 5 items I'd like to cover today, highlighted there in front of you. Number 1, just a basic overview on Windows 7, Windows Server 2008, a little bit about the history of where we've come from as far as their origination and use out on the field. As of today, we have about 81 days left before both of these products go out of support. So just kind of want to give you a heads up on what to expect over the next couple months or so. Then a lot of folks ask, well, what does it mean when a product does go out of support? So the last day of support for both of these will be January 14, 2020. So we do want to talk about what's going to happen then. As we're moving from now until the end of support, though, there are a number of options that you should consider, and there are a number of actions that you should be taking right now. And for many of our clients, they're going to need the whole 2 months just to get ready. So that's really the key crutch of why we put this presentation together. Is this is not something you want to do at the last minute, not something you want to wait till December to do, because you may run into a few bumps, as we're going to highlight today, that you need a couple months to actually go through and what the options are. So with that, let's just go ahead and get started. So again, we're going to start out with the background. Windows 7 came out July 22nd, 2009. Most folks should realize that Microsoft's primary goal when a product comes out is to put it in mainstream support for 5 years and then put it in extended support for another 5 years. So typically getting a full 10 years. So the product did come out summer of 2009. The end, January 13, 2015, mainstream support did end. There's been some confusion out there about what that actually means. So again, for the first 5 years, Microsoft is fully developing, enhancing a product. They're adding new features. They're closing security holes. It's a fully supported product. But after 5 years, it's going to transition from mainstream support, and that is when it's no longer going to be enhanced or extra features added. It's primarily going to be security updated. So again, the product's been around for over 10 years. It is a key topic for us because the statistics show not only with SSE clients, but further and beyond out there, up to 39% of the users are on Windows 7 of some version. So right now we are in the second phase. You're in the extended support phase. So what that means again is no new enhancements, but Microsoft has been doing bug fixes and security updates. Looking over to Windows Server 2008, Windows 7 is really the desktop version. Windows Server 2008 is really the server version of the same operating system. It did launch May 6, 2008. It did have mainstream support up through January 13, 2015, at which time it did enter extended support. Again, when mainstream support ended, that meant no new features, warranty claims. Again, similar scenario, over 10 years of support. Now, what to expect over the next 81 days? Well, if you have Windows 7 out there today, you have it connected to the internet, Microsoft did push a patch out as of April 18, 2019. It's Knowledge Base Article 4493132. And what that did is update the support display on your computers. So what should happen there is as of April 18th, whenever you log into your computer or whenever it's 12 noon, 12 in the afternoon, you should be getting an alert on your computer that Windows 7 is going to expire January 14th, 2020. So that is just a NAG message, and all folks should be able to get info. Get this pop up, you notice it's got some click boxes, so you can click on it and kind of learn more, and here's some additional options there. Okay, let's talk about what happens next as far as what's going to happen on January 14th, 2020. Again, as we've said, the product is transitioning from extended support to end of life. For you, practically, that means no new security updates, no non-security hotfixes, no free or paid assistance, no online technical support. The reason this is a big concern then is this product, as of January 14th, any holes, vulnerabilities, security risks that are found are going to be permanent security risks. So if there is a software exploit or something to take advantage of a security hole in Windows 7 after January, that hole is never going to go away. So this essentially, after January, will be become a permanent security risk on your network. That's on the desktop side, probably bigger risk on the desktop side because users with Windows 7, if they're connected to the internet, they typically are going to be browsing websites, opening email, probably the bigger risk. Windows Server 2008 has a similar scenario in terms of it is transitioning from extended support to end of life. One big differentiator here is no free security updates on premise. Microsoft, of course, is always in the business of trying to get you to move to the cloud. So won't spend a lot of time on it, but I did put the asterisk here that if you were willing to entertain the idea of moving your 2008 servers to the cloud, Microsoft will provide 3 extra years of support of 2008 for Azure cloud hosted 2008 servers. Of course, that's on top of what the Azure fees are. Not our primary focus, but just something to keep in the back of your mind. Again, no non-security updates, no free support options. And again, the server is the center, the hub. It has a centralized information for the organization. So it would be a much greater risk to have no protection and security vulnerabilities there moving forward. So what are some of the options and things you can think about, consider moving forward? Well, at a very high level, you have really 3 options. You can replace your existing computer, whether that's a desktop or a server. You can replace it with a new computer. You can say, well, hey, I've gotten my life out of this, so I'm going to go ahead and retire it. Or you can say, hey, I'm going to do an in-place upgrade or install a supported operating system. So number 1, consider those are the 3 options. A 4th option that we'll talk about a little bit later is down here at number 5, what to do if your software won't run. Other things to consider is if you're going to the next version of Windows 10 and you're trying to use some of your existing hardware, there is a cost to go to Windows 10 now. It ranges out there, but approximately $120. Other things to consider is training for Windows 10 if you're moving users from 7 to 10, because in essence, you're getting a brand new operating system buttons are in a different place, control panels different, printing is different. Users tend to experience a high level of frustration if there's not some degree of training. Number 4 and number 5 are probably the biggest issues that may come up and affect most organizations, and that is we're all running Windows, not for the purpose of running Windows, but because we have some business function that we want to tackle. That may be running Office and typing Word documents on the desktop, but on the server that may be running proprietary software that was designed in the 2008 era to run on top of Windows Server 2008. So what do you do if the software you have today in place is running on the desktop, Windows 7, and it will not run on Windows 10? What do you do? Or what, on the flip side, if you have server software that's designed to run on Server 2008 and the vendor's either gone out of business or not published a version that is compatible for 2016, 2019, current version of Windows, what do you do? So we're going to be talking about those as options here moving forward. Those are the high-level things to consider. So let's just go through a few slides. This is what we have done, are doing with our clients. This is what we would recommend that you do. I'm going to go through a number of items. You might want to take some screenshots here or ask for a copy of the presentation from Tom at the end. But anyway, a number of items. Number 1 is you need to understand how much of a challenge do you have. So start with a complete audit of your environment. Purpose of that audit is really to identify, create a master list. Maybe you want to do this in an Excel spreadsheet. A lot of tools out there to help you do this. But you want to get a master list of all the computers on your network, servers, and workstations. You want to have them flagged by the type of operating system that they have installed. And in essence, your goal is to identify the number of Windows 7 and 2008 computers in operation. Third, it is very important from a budgeting perspective. You spend a little bit of time for each one of the Windows 7 and Server 2008s to determine, hey, how long has this been in operation? When did I actually purchase this particular piece of hardware? If you don't have this readily at hand, you can take the service tag or serial number, whether it's Dell or HP, the common two. Dell, you go to support.dell.com, type in the service tag, and it will pop up the original purchase date. Purpose of this is you want to not only identify which systems are Windows 7 and which Windows Server, but you want to know the age of each one of the devices on your network. The reason this is important is we're going to take a different action depending on how old they are. Because at the end of the day, you want to look at your entire life cycle because there is a cost if you take things out too early. There is a cost if you try to keep things in there too long. So what we're talking about there is that Windows workstations typically have a life cycle of 3 to 4 years. So if you have a workstation that has a life cycle of 3 to 4 years, workstation's already 6 years old, it's really not going to be a candidate for an upgrade because it's past its life cycle. On the flip side, if you had a workstation that we'd expect to get 4 years out of it and you've only used it for 1, hey, there are 3 years of potential life left in it. Maybe that's going to make sense. So we're going to talk about that. So the first thing just to put in your back pocket is we do recommend a life cycle of 3 to 4 years for workstations, and for servers, we typically recommend a maximum of 5 years. Now, next items, continuing on. So you've got your computer list, you've got your inventory. What we recommend you do is, in addition to identifying the Windows 7 and 2008 systems, spend some time and color code any of the Windows 7 or Server 2008 computers that are 4 years old or older. Color code those red, and you'll see why in a minute. Computers Windows 7 that's 2 to 3 years old, color those yellow. Server 2008 is 3 years older or less, cover that in yellow. In essence, we're really moving to the point that any computers red color coded should be retired. Any computers that are yellow color coded may be candidates for upgrade, as we're going to talk about here shortly. Next, very important, probably one of the most critical things, is you do have your servers and your workstations to perform the business, the duties of the business, and typically that's going to involve key applications based on your industry. So the next thing you want to do is you want to make a thorough and detailed list of all of the applications deemed critical. Critical application would be one where you cannot do the business, you cannot continue the work of the business without this particular application. So in essence, we're looking at anything running on a Windows 7 workstation, Windows Server 2008, that you have deemed critical. Next step that we would highly suggest, and this is why you want to get a head start on this and maybe have a month or two to go through it, is you want to have time to reach out to each and every critical application vendor that is running, where you have a critical application running on a Windows 7 or Server 2008. And in essence, what you want to do is ask a few questions. So as you reach out to that vendor, the first question you're going to ask is, what is the recommended and supported desktop operating system software running on Windows 7 today? That vendor may come back and say the recommended supported operating system is Windows 7. Well, that means there's no upgrade path, right? So we're going to need to take a particular action for that. Or they may alternative come back and say, hey, our recommended upgrade path is Windows 10, and here's what we recommend you have. Basically, you just need to get that information. Is there an upgrade path from 7 to 10, or is there not? Okay. Same thing's going to happen on the server side. So on the server side, typically if it's on the server side, we're not only going to see Windows Server 2008, we may even see some versions of Microsoft SQL Server. But essentially for that, you want to understand, hey, if I have application running on Server 2008, SQL Server, even you're asking the vendor now, what is the recommended and supported operating system, right? The current supported operating systems are Windows Server 2016, Windows Server 2019. If your vendor tells you we do not have a version that works on 2016 or does not work on 2019, your only option in the long term is going to be replace this critical server or workstation. We're going to see here there's some short-term path options to kind of bridge that gap, but long term, you're going to need to be starting now to identify some alternate solutions. Okay, so now you've done your application research, you've talked to your vendors, you've got your color-coded hardware in hand. Now, in essence, you're going to have about 4 different options that you're going to go through. Some of those computers that are not running critical applications that you do not need on a day-to-day basis, flag those computers for retirement, whether those are desktops or servers. Short of getting the data off of them, just flag them for retirement. Computers or desktop servers that are color-coded for replacement, though, those that are running critical applications, if they're going to be replaced, you're going to need to know what is the new hardware spec for the desktop, what is the new hardware spec for the server. Now, if you did have some of those computers that were in yellow, that's where they come here and play in option 3. Anything in yellow could be potentially upgraded. So these are going to be essentially new desktops or servers that were not in use for very long, or we essentially want to repurpose them and go ahead and do an upgrade. Okay, moving on. This is the case that we most often run into with a select handful of our clients, and that is they end up in a scenario where they're running critical software to the business. It's often happening in a manufacturing environment, but they're running critical software either on the desktop or the server, and that particular vendor has gone out of business and there is no upgrade path. Okay. Actions you're really going to need to take in the short term is to the extent possible, and I say extent possible because sometimes these are connected and in heavy use, right? But if, for example, you had a database and you're using it for parts, or you're looking up items. To the extent possible, we may be able to take that computer or those computers and isolate them from the rest of the network. Maybe we make them a standalone computer. What we're trying to do is to remove the risk, or at least reduce the risk of these computers impacting security moving forward. Remember, your security is only as good as your weakest link. So if you have Windows 7, 2008 servers that have security vulnerabilities, and those will begin to pile up after January, those will never again be patched. Now, for those computers that you had in place, again, those that are yellow, if it's a desktop and you're thinking about upgrading them to Windows 10, just keep in mind you do have these minimum specifications. Gigahertz or faster, most computers are going to have that. 32 gig operating system is going to need 1 gig. You really probably want to be thinking at 2 for 64. 64 is really the current standard. Very small 16 gig hard drive, I'd be looking at the bigger 20 gig or greater. Video card that supports DirectX 9. Video resolution 800 by 600. These are all very low specs, so most hardware within recent times should be able to support this. Next, you want to be thinking about budget. Budget, of course, needs to factor in, I guess, 3 key things. One, you want to have the hardware. This is going to be the hardware that you're going to need to purchase new. So this will probably be new Windows 10 hardware, new server hardware for Server 2016, Server 2019. And then depending on whether you're going to use your third-party vendor, an outside consultant, or some other path, you're going to need a budget for services. And then finally, you're going to need to consider that if you're going to a new version of software, particularly if the desktop's going to change, you are going to need to consider training and training needs. So you want to complete that in the budget. Timeline, can't emphasize enough, this is going to be custom for every environment. It's really impossible to say without doing a discovery of your environment. But without knowing a lot of detail, and you're trying to get some timelines in mind, most organizations can spend probably 2 to 4 weeks to review the current environment, and the goal is to see what's there, Windows 7, Server 2008, see what the critical applications are, see which ones can be replaced, see which ones need to be retired, and in essence, spend 2 to 4 weeks to understand your current environment and develop your plan. We never suggest going to new versions of anything in the production environment. So to the extent possible, you want to set up your new environment in parallel, in connection to your current environment, set it up and test everything. Make sure it's going to work with the new hardware, the new software, make sure it's going to talk and work over your existing environment. And after you're satisfied, stay in this particular phase until you're satisfied that all your key components are working. And then generally it's going to take a week or two, typically after hours, nights and weekends, with a goal of moving these tested items into production. After you've moved them in, anytime you go to a new operating system or anytime you change critical applications, it is never going to be the case that you're not going to have a few little hiccups. So we recommend making sure you're staffed appropriately, at least for a week or so, that initial first week, to be able to jump in and address any issues that are, I guess, still outstanding. So in a nutshell, those are the key items that we've got. Those are the things you consider. If you'd like a copy of this presentation, you can reach out to Tom. And really, that's the highlights of what we got today. Tom, I'll pass it back over to you.
Yeah, Vince, thank you very much, sir. We did have just one question come up in regards to the applications. You shared a lot of information on that subject. The only question we saw on that is, what do you do if the critical application we have can't be upgraded past Windows or 2008?
You know, that's a tough question. It's actually a question that we get a lot of, and that's because folks have software that's been running out there for a long time. A lot of times these vendors have gone out of business. So in essence, what you need to do is you're going to need to analyze that application. You're going to need to determine, are there successors to it? Is there a competitor product? Is there another alternative that you can go to? So long term, your first thing you're looking at is there a long-term alternative, right? Is there anybody out there? And in order to answer that, you're probably going to need to spend some time doing evaluation. What does your product do today? What features and functions does it have? How does it work? What do the competitor products offer out there? Probably going to take some time to do that, but you're going to need to start that path, because at the end of the day, the product you're on today is dead, and you're going to need to get off of it. And what we're trying to do really is to bridge that gap. So in the interim, what you're really then going to do is say, okay, besides what I'm going to do long term, now I got to look at the server or workstation. Does the server workstation need to be on the network? Are other devices talking to it? What you want to try to do is isolate it from the greater network. So for example, we might have a client that is running a custom applications to database. Well, if it's just a database and they can disconnect it from the main network, put it on a separate network or standalone mode, and somebody can come directly to the monitor, log in, run them, whatever queries they have, then that system is still performing the functions of the business, but is not connected to the network where any malware that might want to exploit vulnerabilities on that system, it can't get to it. So ideally, you would take it off the mainstream network. If there's a small subset of systems, you know, maybe a Windows 7 workstation and a 2008 server, can't put them completely separate, maybe isolate them on their own network without internet access, and then long-term you investigate how you can get off that product. So that's really the best advice I can give on that, Tom.
Oh, no, perfect. Well, from what I'm seeing, there's no other additional questions. We want to thank you guys again for joining us today for this webinar, and hope that you found this information about Windows 7 and Server 2008 beneficial. You know, big changes like this don't come along very frequently from Microsoft, you know, every 7 years or so, but they are very critical. And we highly recommend that if you have not started planning for this upgrade away from these two products, that you start now, as there will definitely be long-term repercussions if left unchanged. You know, please don't hesitate to reach out to us here at SSE if you aren't sure where to begin or what options you may have, or just if we can provide some further insight to the subject. And want to thank you everyone again. Hope everyone has a great day and a great weekend, and have a nice day. Thank you again, Vince.
All right. Thanks, Tom.